Hello and welcome. In this lecture, we're going to be lighting the interior of our scene with torches and chandeliers and looking at the different lighting settings available to us to tweak the light intensity and various shadow settings as well. Let's dive in and see how this is done. Before we go any further, I noticed that I've got all these edge stones that are currently not organized in the outliner. So I'm going to take these and drag them into the dungeon folder so they disappear with that dungeon. Okay, now that we've got that set up, it's time to start lighting the interior of our scene. Now, my weapon of choice here is going to be to use the BP torch. If you search for that, then there's this great blueprint that's set up already with some nice flaming torch effect and a light as well. My only problem with this torch is that it's a little bit bright. So what we can do here is we can make our own version of the torch by going to the details pane, going to the blueprint button and going create child blueprint class. And I'm going to call mine the torch, and then we usually put the modification after it. So BP torch underscore dungeon. So this is going to be my dungeon torch. And we're going to place this in the root of content and click select. So that creates the torch. We don't actually need it open, but we can go ahead back into our level, and there's the torch right there. Just going to change my grid snapping units to 10 so that I can correctly place it on the wall, right, like so. So we've got our torch attached to the wall, and what I wanted to do is to modify a couple of properties of the light. If you have a look at the torch blueprint, you can see it's made up of a number of components. One of them is the mesh of the torch itself, one of them is the point light, and one is the fire. I want to change a few properties about the point light because it's not quite set up how I want it to. For example, it's not casting a shadow with this pillar, and that's because of the way this point light is set up. If we go down into the properties, you can see there is a cast shadows property that's unchecked. Let's check that first. And there you go. We've now got some shadowing going on in our scene. Unfortunately, it's got this really ugly shadow here from the torch itself. So what we can do to correct just that is to select the torch SM torch mesh and then scroll down to its property or search for its property called shadow. And you can see that there is a dynamic shadow and static shadow. We can uncheck both of these. And you can see that it's no longer got that ugly shadow. It's now just casting a nice light and shadowing with the pillars and with the scene around us. Now, the next thing to do when we go back to that torch light component is to just cancel out the search and have a look at some of the other lighting properties we've got here. One of them is the intensity. I think it's too bright. So I'm going to start by taking it down by a factor of 10 to 500. And for me, that just feels like a much more moody ambient light for a crypt and a dungeon. So I'm going to go with that. And we'll go back to the torch light again. And then there's the attenuation radius. This means how far can this torch cast its light? And actually making it smaller, making the attenuation radius smaller, has good performance impact because it's having to compute less shadowing. So I'm going to make it as small as I think is reasonable, which is just about, I think 800 units is a good attenuation radius for me. And now all these properties, I've been making them here in the outliner, but if I wanted them to apply to all instances of my BP Dungeon Torch, so if I went to content browser and brought in the BP Torch, you can see this one's really, really bright. So let's select the one that I've actually modified and made all those modifications to. And I'll go to the blueprint button again. And this time I'm going to select Apply Instance Changes to Blueprint. And that's going to make it so that all of the blueprints now match those changes that I just made. So that's what I'm going to do. You can obviously choose to set things up differently with your lighting. I'm going to add in a few more torches here to light my scene. I think another one on this pillar. Just going to drag it in and rotate it about 180 degrees. Seems to be well placed in the wall already. And then these little alcoves here are a bit dark, so I'm just going to switch to the unlit mode. place a torch on the wall and rotate it by 180 degrees, and then do the same on the flip wall. And then let's preview this in the lit scene. So you can see how it slowly adapts the lighting. This is both Lumen taking its time to work out the light calculations, and also the other thing that's going on here is that there's a little bit of exposure compensation going on so that it can handle very bright outdoor scenes, and indoor scenes it can change the exposure for. So I'm happy mostly with how this is lit. If we wanted to, we could put a chandelier in here. That's another blueprint that we've got. So we can search for the BP chandelier in the content drawer. Then we can bring it in and place it up here above. And the chandelier works a little bit differently. It's actually got some properties on the actor. So if you select the actor level of the blueprint, go to the details pane, and then check the add point light, you can see that it adds indeed a light for that chandelier, and we can change some of the properties of that light here. So we could change the intensity if we wanted to. We can change the attenuation radius. I think is definitely too small. I'm going to change that to 1000, like so. So that kind of fills the room with a little bit more light from that chandelier up the top. So you could use a combination of the chandelier lights, the torch lights on your walls, and so on to light up the rest of your level. So that's going to be your challenge. Have a little bit of fun with it, lighting your level. Use some torches and chandeliers, experiment with the mood, create some blueprints for different configurations of lighting. So if you want to have different torches down in the crypt that are even dimmer, you could create a different child blueprint for that. And similarly with the chandelier, if you wanted to change the properties and use those properties in multiple locations, you could do that too. There's always the option of bringing in just point lights and spotlights and area lights if you want those as well without any associated meshes. Then you could just use that for lighting the specific elements of your level if there's things you want to draw attention to. And we'll be doing that a little bit later on in the section with some other elements in my level. So pause the video and have a go. Okay, welcome back. So I'm going to basically fast forward through this. It's going to be more of the same, just me placing down these actors to light the level. So that's me done. Let's go and have a little run through the level and I'll show you what I've done. Nothing's changed here in the main portion of the level. There's one light down here in the corridor. I wanted to keep it quite dark and mysterious for the great reveal. And I'm noticing this is not quite aligned as I wanted it to be, so I'm going to move it a bit more centrally like so. Then we go into the corridor and we're keeping it nice and dark and moody in here. We've got the door at the other end. I'm still not happy with the fact that there's so much light bleeding through this door. But, oh well, we'll find a way to solve that another time, or I might not, but you might polish things off a little bit better than I'm polishing things. So here we go. I had to put a light here so that it would illuminate this little feature piece. Then we can come down the corridor and we see the open door, and we come in to our nicely lit mausoleum, which has got a couple of torches on either side and a nice chandelier so that it's very well lit, because this is going to be an important room for us to understand what's going on and to see the railings that shut, etc. So that's it. That is my lighting done, and I will see you in the next lecture.